In one of my earlier videos, I did a tier list of multiple EXEs and I explained them. It now sits as my third most popular video on the channel, but ever since I did that video, I've been getting requests of one particular EXE that I overlooked. I thought that it had little to no information on him, so I didn't cover him. But as it turns out, this particular EXE has more than enough to make a video on. An EXE whose name and appearance takes after another EXE, but has so much more lying underneath. Today, I am finally covering Xer0phanes!
Now wait just a second!
Who are you?
I am Xenophanes. Xer0phanes, the perfect god!
Doesn't ring a bell.
What? How? My whole name digs after Xeno. I was an EXE Gen bad-mouthing Inkstalk.
Oh, I remember you now. The Green Xeno.
I swear to me, enough! You have been sidelining me for too long.
Okay, it's not all my fault. I had Shimmy help me find information on the EXEs for the video, and I came up with nothing.
You misspelled my name.
Sim?
Don't pin this on me!
Okay, so I may or may not have screwed up, but still, what if I say no?
Do it, because if you don't, I will make you play the first and second Spirits of Hell games to completion all over again.
No, please. Anything but that. Okay, you win.
Good. Now start the video.
A being made to surpass Sonic in every conceivable way, but is abandoned midway through due to a mad doctor's ego. So it's born anew after a catastrophic failure, where in every timeline it fails. And now it seeks to become the perfect god. Will this being achieve its goal, or live an endless cycle of failure? In pursuit of perfection, he finds that there is a much bigger world out there, galaxies, friends and foes to encounter. Xer0phanes, despite what you might think, isn't another version of Xenophanes. I mean, I know a lot of people will just go, oh, Xenophanes, but green. But it's an entirely unique character that simply pays homage to the FNF variant, since Chip, the creator, really liked it. This was before he knew about other EXEs like Lord X, and in his eyes, it was a sort of evolution to Sonic.exe. He wanted to make a character that represented the good of the community, so don't get it confused. You'll learn why this character is unique. When I was looking into him, I realized that there was quite a bit to learn, as you could probably tell by the length of this video. And he's gone through quite a bit of changes. I also owe it to Chip, since in my last tier list video, I didn't say anything about him and kind of skipped over him because I couldn't find anything, and as the previous bit revealed, I spelled his name wrong. I'd like to think that I've gotten better. So he's getting his own video. I also think he's pretty cool, and I'm definitely not being forced to make this video. So here I'll be talking about his current lore and some of his old lore and other projects that he is involved with, as there may be a few you guys are familiar with and involve some pretty cool EXEs. To avoid confusion, I'll be reading his story directly off the doc that's publicly available. Links below if you'd like to read it for yourself. I'll start with the new lore, then after I'll do a short summary of his old lore so you guys can see how much this character has changed. Additionally, stick around to the end so you guys can find out all the projects that he's involved with. But first, I got something for you. Chicky is an absolutely amazing soap, but don't just take my word for it. Even Xero likes it.
I'm not like other EXEs. I actually take regular baths. The smell of blood and corpses can really leave a lasting smell. But that's why I use the Makima body wash bar. Now that's a woman who knows how to keep her workers in line. Or for when I know things are going to be explosive throughout my day, I use the bomb body wash bar.
This is a beautiful box, and it is only for a limited time. It just released yesterday. Go get yourself one of these. Couldn't recommend this one enough. Use my code down in the description, 10% off for Chainsaw Man.
Is the sponsor segment over now?
Yes, Zero. It's over.
Oh, thank me.
Let's get into the story of Xer0phanes. The origin story of Xenophanes begins during Sonic Heroes, but there are some minor story alterations to the plot. A new secret project of Robotnik's is created, and it is unknown when, a clone of Sonic created very early in his career as he was thinking of ways to create a suitable antithesis to Sonic. Clone would be dysfunctional, and he would eventually resent the concept itself, finding it against his ego to straight copy Sonic 1-to-1. This would likely be made around Sonic Adventure 1 or 2, as SA1 is where we see multiple unused Mecha Sonics, implying that at some point Eggman starts making many more prototypes of Sonic's robotic doppelganger en masse, and Sonic Adventure 2 introduces Shadow, who seems to have the upper hand against Sonic in a lot of ways. So we're looking at a modern in-universe creation, and this leads us all the way up to the end of Sonic Frontiers. The main difference in the Sonic storyline is what happens to Metal Sonic. In Sonic Heroes, Metal finds himself defeated by Super Sonic and is reverted back to Neo. He's confused as to why, or how, Sonic is able to still defeat him. The machine would feel one last spark of emotion from remnants of his time as Neo, rage. He curses Sonic and says that one day, he will be back. He will always come back to beat them. Metal malfunctions and his eye lights begin to flicker. Sonic hesitates for a moment, and Tails, amid the cheering with the others, would notice their conversation was dragging on and would ponder. Why is Sonic still in super form? Now, it's important to know that they take a little bit from Fleetway Sonic, in super form specifically. Without purification causes an individual to be slightly more irritable and aggressive / prone to anger, unless the power is extremely concentrated and purified through processes like reverse cyber corruption or purifying the emeralds themselves. This leads to a much more brutal decision, and Sonic doesn't maintain his usual mercy. Sonic decides that things will be different this time. Metal almost destroyed the entire world. His friends could have died. He's become too dangerous. And so, he makes a decision much different than usual. He completely obliterates Metal Sonic with a single blast of chaos energy, vaporizing everything. This version of Metal Sonic truly has nothing left to recover. Only after this act does Sonic finally dispel the emeralds. The rest is unspoken silence. Eggman would likely try to wipe any backups as well. Both sides feared what this metal could do and wanted no part in the long run. This paves the way for Xer0phanes' story, as without Metal Sonic, the Doctor needs a new counter to the blue blur. We still have a form of Metal Sonic, but it's not the same one from Sonic Heroes. No memory or archive is documented. That being said, we move forward all the way to Sonic Frontiers, where I actually just lied to you. The top secret project of a cybernetically enhanced clone of Sonic that Eggman had locked away long ago would suddenly start to show signs of brain activity. It turns out Neo Metal never truly was destroyed. It had made a backup of itself without the Doctor's knowledge in its rebellious streak, and in doing so, it had taken this vessel, one that the Doctor himself rejected by now, to keep itself both safe and out of sight from Sonic and Eggman. This implies that this is an iteration of Metal Sonic that was never wiped of its rebellious nature by Robotnik, which is further backed up by the fact that he hid away in a creation that was all but forgotten. There will be Sonic Frontier spoilers, so if you want to avoid those, make sure you cover your ears for this next part. Alright, I'm gonna say it now. Sage dies, hence she sacrifices herself and barely manages to kill the End before it attempts to unleash its true form and wreak havoc on the world with the final attack. This is where the story takes a different direction. Instead of fully being destroyed, the End's corrupted essence decides to search for something else to possess. It latches onto Eggman's technology, his Eggmobile, Carefully, it hides just long enough to return to his base, where it can hop across technology rapidly enough to remain hidden from the doctor's keen sight, who would already be sluggish due to the mourning of his daughter. I'd like to say that I could totally see something like this happening, and while I like the end of Sonic Frontiers, the story goes out of its way to explain small things, and adds to why a character does something. Why does it exist? How is it able to do these things? Well, it's explained here for the most part. And the result of this new branch is terrifying. The entity finds its way to the rejected Sonic vessel. Metal's subconscious mind was present, so the entity couldn't just take over it entirely, but instead they would fuse together. The end and Metal Sonic was the perfect vessel to complete the transformation of a new being. Due to the nature of cyber corruption and Metal's already existent drive to seek chaos energy, he felt an insatiable hunger for more. Immediately, the entity had broken free of the containment, quickly tripping multiple alarms in Eggman's base. Robotnik sends forces of his badniks, all of which are swiftly destroyed, but in a way unbecoming of what he'd expect from Sonic or his cast. He recognized the brutality he saw. If anything, it was all so eerily familiar. Eventually, Eggman is confronted by this mysterious new entity. Sonic? But it made no sense. It looked too young to be Sonic, and yet still older than classic Sonic. At the same time, he recognized something in it, a touch of his own creation. The Eggman insignia on the creature's shoulder would say everything. His prototype broke free. Why? What was even going on? He was confused, but decided to warn the entity not to overstep nonetheless. The creature ignored Eggman's warnings, charging a spin dash and striking Eggman dead center with enough force to knock him to the ground. The Chaos Emerald that Eggman had collected on his way back after the Frontiers' ending would be knocked to the ground. At this point, Metal Sonic appears. The current model. The machine sees what looks to be Sonic to him, and is quick to defend the Doctor. After an initial ambush, Metal gains the upper hand and maintains it throughout the fight. Eventually, Metal gets them on the ground, leading to what would be a killing blow. So right now we have old Metal versus new Metal Sonic technically, and this idea raises the stakes quite a bit. I'm sure at some point we wanted to see Neo Metal Sonic come back, at least I know I have, and in the games. And here we get that, kind of. In the midst of the brawl, the entity would be in reach of the Chaos Emerald and would jump to grab it, barely reaching and absorbing it in its desperation to charge up. Similar to Scourge, his color changes upon taking the emerald. Unlike Scourge, however, the shade of his fur grew darker and more burnt instead of greener, gradually hinting that his color scheme would eventually land on what Zero's final color scheme is now. The now chaos-empowered entity runs off, hungry, starving even, for more of that power after a small taste of it. The next part essentially has this weird looking Sonic find Tails, take the Chaos Emerald to give him that dark green EXE look, until eventually it fights with Metal Sonic. But the entity ends up destroying Metal, removing half of its body. The creature would rush across Mobius to find Chaos Emeralds and absorb them. Meanwhile, Eggman would project himself through the broken Metal Sonic head to talk to Tails. He explains that this was a copy of Sonic at first, but decided to ditch the idea due to his pride. This, indeed, was becoming what happened with Metal Overlord, and Tails knew that he had to tell Sonic and friends right away. So that's exactly what he does. Rushing to Sonic and crew, Tails would relay the information of what he's just experienced, confused and shocked. That strange ability, absorption of chaos energy, likeness to Sonic, it was something the others definitely needed to know about. Tails would use a device that could track chaos energy. He'd see the creature's energy signature being represented as 2 Chaos Emeralds traveling together. Shadow was with the Sonic cast and had another emerald, while the other 4 were all being hunted down. Time was running out, where Sonic is forced to confront his past, and is made to face a being that's gotten stronger and adapted, same as him. It's also here Zero gets his full form, the one we're all familiar with. The setting is Hidden Palace, placed before the Master Emerald. He also finds his identity here, naming himself Zero. This sequence is probably the most impactful part of the story. The fight begins with an analysis from Tails. Zero's body seems to be adapting to chaos energy, but can't handle all the power of the Master Emerald yet, Hence, he's embedding chaos energy into his body to enhance himself permanently to then be able to take on more chaos energy in the long run. With all 7, he would be too dangerous and could completely alter his own techno-organic biology. Early in the fight, Xer0 makes sure to eliminate all exits and prevents escape. He's also careful to channel the energy of the emeralds into a disruptive field, making the use of chaos control impossible. He can't escape now. It's now or never. Xer0 ends up getting Shadow's emerald, and everyone but Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles end up getting defeated. When Shadow is beaten, they do everything they can to juggle the last emerald from Xer0 and keep it away. Eventually, we get a final showdown of Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails, basically as a repeat of Sonic Heroes finale. As Xer0 defeats Knuckles and Tails, Sonic is the last one standing. Xer0 gets the best of him and obtains the final emerald, exploding with absurd amounts of power. Sonic decides enough is enough and uses the Master Emerald to go super. The fight goes to a standstill, but eventually Xer0 reveals he was siphoning the Master Emerald and Super Sonic's chaos energy this whole time, meaning then they were evenly matched, but Xer0 was gradually becoming too strong and would outlast Super Sonic. Sonic then decides to go all out. He lands a barrage of powerful, massive attacks on Xer0, his full Frontiers moveset coming into play. Sonic's final, last-ditch effort comes to mind. If he can make Xer0 overload with too much chaos energy, perhaps it will destroy him? He decides to try this and rams into Xer0 for a final blow, pushing him into the Master Emerald and forcing him against it with supersonic flight and strength. The power causes Xer0 to overload, but at the last minute, we see an odd red glitchy haze appear around Xer0. Cyber corruption. From the end, it allowed Xer0 to begin to convert all the overload of too much power instead into chaos energy and even more strength before finally there was a gigantic explosion that leveled Angel Island, blowing the encased cavern of Hidden Palace sky high. The explosion leaves everything in ruins. Angel Island is practically nothing but floating rocks and chunks of charred or gray land in orbit. Sonic is seen knocked out of super and wakes up, beaten and bruised, looking around to see the darkness of space. Sonic is confused. He looks around. He tries to get up, but before he can, he's grabbed by the throat and lifted up. A massive white flash erupts. Eggman is seen flying to space in his Eggmobile as fast as he can, but is too late. He thinks back to where he went wrong, to the loss of his daughter, to the family he could have had. Sage, Orbot, Cubot, Metal. The explosion consumed everything. Mobius, the solar system, the galaxy. Eventually, everything turns white. As the blast clears with an ear-splitting sound, the universe is destroyed. Xer0 looks at the desolation around him, and one fact becomes clear. He won. This marks the origin of Xenophanes, and how things played out different to the Sonic timeline. I really like this take as an EXE. It's refreshing to see something new like this. But his story doesn't just end there. In fact, it only begins. Xer0phanes rips in space-time and his shattered, destroyed universe. He chooses to explore these and finds out how the multiverse works. Eventually, Xer0 adopted the name Xer0phanes, named after the first entity he encountered that led him down to finding out about these EXEs. He finds a universe desolate, empty, easy to mold to his liking. Most of all, it was unstable, but he could work with that. If his memories as Metal Sonic served him for anything, he had blueprints and was a genius. He used chaos magic to create a hub world named the Prickle, named due to it being a universe literally full of jabs in space-time that connect universes together. He bridged many worlds together, from EXEs and survivors alike, under the agreed-upon rule and pretense that no conflict is to take place within the domain or near methods of travel to it. Trade, safe haven, conditions to do something that may benefit Xer0's interest, all facilitated within his little base of operations. He's in charge, but claims not to be an evil mastermind like his original creator. He helps EXEs and survivors alike in their issues if they can offer something of interest to him in return. But he is no hero. Like his old rival from the past, Xer0 is just that. A moral compass of Xer0, neutrality, gray on the scale of good or bad. He is a force that simply exists in his corner of the multiverse, allowing demons, angels, void entities, humans, Mobians, and more to all coexist under his rule. He refuses to treat it like an empire, as Robotnik did, but also is mindful not to get too buddy-buddy with his partners to make friends per se, like Sonic. He's a culmination of his experience and growth throughout his history, but at the same time, he's true to his title. Zero becomes more than a machine. He becomes more than the sum of his parts just added together, and made something greater of himself. The story's theme is realizing Zero's true potential. He was destined to be more than just a machine for Robotnik, and he sees that opportunity and finds a new home. He even has a close circle of EXEs that he works with, which I'll bring up a little later. The story here is written pretty well and opens the door for a lot of collaborations and stories to tell. But before we delve into that, I'd like to briefly summarize his old lore. When Chip made the lore, he had little writing experience. The main difference in Zero's story and his old lore lies within his creation. In the new lore, he merges with the end to create what we see now. However, in the old lore, Eggman had the same idea to create a bio life form, but he used the chip of Neo-Metal Sonic and the skull of Mephiles the Dark, also having the blood of both Sonic and Shadow infused into his being. Events are sort of similar, but diverge a bit heavier. Zero is unable to surpass Sonic despite fighting him numerous times, but he gets the idea of using the power of chaos. In this world, Fleetway Supersonic existed, and it turned Sonic into an uncontrollable power machine, and Zero thought if he got his hands on that he could defeat him. Eggman is opposed to this idea and rejects him outright. In the old lore, Zero didn't kill Eggman right away. In fact, he worked with him quite a bit until eventually he went off on his own to enact his plan. Well, he ends up killing Sonic and friends, and when he comes back to Eggman, he thinks that they can finally move on and end the constant cycle of fighting Sonic and losing. It turns out Eggman is pissed by this because he didn't get to show them how superior he was. It was Xer0phanes who did it. Xenophanes also isn't very happy with this response, and he tries to kill Eggman right then and there. But Eggman has one last trick up his sleeve. He triggers a trap. A laser cannon powered by the Phantom Ruby and the Paradox Prism is fired at him. Using this, Xer0phanes was sealed away and cast out into the multiverse, while Eggman is left to die. This links him to the events of Sonic Prime, and when 9 is utilizing the Paradox Prism, the shockwaves eventually hit his containment cell enough times to shatter it. He's set free into the multiverse and sees the endless possibilities. But the one thing he notices most is his enemy, Sonic. Multiverses with Sonic in them. Additionally, he'd see into the multiverse of EXEs, and using his Metal Sonic data that's built into him, he can learn and adapt to these creatures and become stronger that way. By doing this, he can learn to be a better and more superior version of Sonic. There's also a lot more to the story than that, as the lore was developed over many years. And while I don't think this path was a bad one to take, I do like the new lore as it's easier to work with more stories in my opinion. Now that you guys understand who he is, you're probably curious about what he can do. After all, he fought Frontier Sonic and won. He's a very powerful being with some unique abilities. Let's go over some of those, so the people who like hearing about EXEs and their power capabilities can be happy, and how far he could push his power. Xer0phanes can transform into other EXEs to fully harness their power, but when he does so, he's locked out of his base form abilities. In order for him to do this, he has to have a full understanding of how those powers work. And if you're thinking this was the EXE equivalent of Ben 10, well, you'd be right actually. According to Chip, this was inspired off of Ben 10. So, Zero wants to create code puppets like Fatal Error. Well, then he'll need to fully understand the ability in order to replicate it. And while he could do all of this, it does drain his power even if it's replenishing at the same time. It can still be taxing to pull off, but Zero doesn't always do the fighting himself. He also has the Cybertalics. It's his personal army of robots that have the same strength and reflexes of the Metallics. The name Cybertalics is a fusion of Metallics and the Cybermen from Doctor Who. The next ability is probably Zero's strongest and is used in dire needs. If Xer0 has exhausted every possibility, there is a transformation he can undergo for a short time. He activates a form that allows him to use every EXE ability he has collected so far, all simultaneously. It's basically a giant EXE chimera, but burns through his power rapidly. Xer0, Xeno, and Xenophyte represents the crystals. Rewrites shoulder and body, EXE's arms with scythe blades, Requital's claw hooks with Solari's wings. The tail is a combination of OMT, Amora, and Xylon. The wings are hyper accurate, 2007X, and Shadow's Doom wings. The X over his chest is a reference to Lord X, but there's also a reference to Sonic in the comics. His extra hands are a combination of Fatal / Legacy with Genesis X's eyes in the middle. Also, you'll notice the final escape ring. Now, Xer0phanes is incredibly powerful and can adapt to multiple situations, but his weakness comes from his limited power source, and again, he can adapt, transform, and replenish energy, so he's a horrifying foe. But that doesn't make him unkillable, as with enough power and resources you can outlast him, though incredibly difficult. It is possible given the right opponent. Also, if you catch him off guard somehow, you might be able to land a good blow on him. But he's not strong because he fights alone, but that is a big part of it. He has a close circle that he involves himself with. These EXEs are lesser known in the community and either joined willingly or after they proved their worth to Xenophanes. This close circle is a sort of like his guardians, similar to Lord X and his guardians. Each of these EXEs have their own stories and personalities. These are EXEs that Xer0 has high interest in, so he offers them high positions of command at the prickle. Not only does this allow Xer0 to get to know them more personally and learn about their abilities at a closer angle, but it also allows Xer0 to hopefully earn their partnership, basically befriending them, becoming their mentors or work partners. So I'll start listing them off now. First we have God of Fun, who's made by Sakura_Guy, but is under unofficial co-ownership by Chip and Kashi. And this is one of Xer0's most trusted partners. The leader of the Majins befriended Xer0 after a faithful encounter. Now him and his army of Majins scour the multiverse for resources for the prickle, while also gaining the knowledge and whereabouts of other universes. It's important to note that these play off of the stories that are already known about these EXEs, but the characters are not exactly one-to-one for the sake of working with a crossover story and working with Xer0's world. Thus, they might be altered. So, they're not exactly the same, they're a little altered, but tell pretty much the same story. The next is Sabagoth, the angelic tyrant who became Xer0's bodyguard after a long and strenuous fight against him, made by V-Bug. Next is an EXE I actually covered recently, and this is Nihilith. The artist and owner is Mode Productions. This is a variant of Lord X that is infused with the power of chaos energy. Drawn to each other, and despite Xer0's views about the original Lord X, this one reluctantly agreed to work alongside Xer0. There's actually some really cool art of the two of them. Alright, the next EXE is Xen, who I've briefly mentioned before. Xen is a deal maker and sees great potential in Xer0. Most EXEs bore Xen, but he sees the heart, the passion, and effort behind the things Xer0 does, and not only is he entertained by it, but it excites him. Next up, we have 2007X made by Presstoons. The Siren of Souls had her whole worldview crushed when Xer0 entered her world. For years, she led herself to believe she is the original X, but after a denial-filled battle, she joined Xer0's forces to explore the multiverse. 2007X was on the tier list video if you guys watched that, and she truly believed she was the original X, but you know, the multiverse kinda changes that. Dollface, the Perfectionist, is next, owned and drawn by Cinemaxes. In an alternate timeline of events, Xer0 saved Dollface, just right before her Sonic was gonna kill them. Xer0 was watching over Dollface, completely impressed by her methods and tactics. Xer0 offered Dollface to come to the prickle with him so he could show her what it means to be perfect. After all, who else to teach her than none other than the perfect god? Just want to stop and say I really like the design and art style. Next we have an EXE made by the voice of Xer0phanes, Kashikage, and it's named Overlord X, otherwise known as Lord Xenon. After a sudden intrusion of Xer0's castle, Overlord was impressed by him, so he offered a partnership with him. Now he stands as one of Xer0's main generals. Yeah, honestly, the prickle has become a pretty scary place with all these EXEs running around, but we're not even done yet. as we have another named Cylon, made by Oblixion. He's a conqueror of sorts, and after a fierce fight, the two befriended each other, and he now stands as one of Zero's bodyguards. Not only does he have an army, not only is he incredibly powerful, but he's got fully powered EXEs as his bodyguard, and as some of you may know, the power of friendship is probably the strongest thing you can have. He's not someone you want to piss off. There are a few honorable mentions, where I'll just say the name and not really give a description, because there are more in his inner circle. There's Monolix by Crimble Sniffles, Midnight by Just Hari, Proto by Proto Blood, Phantom.skx by Hazel Frost, Woodhog by Camero, Wistful by Frazzy Bear. These are all beings who work with Zero, and keep in mind he will likely interact with more EXEs in the future, and more may enter his close circle depending on if they can prove their worth. Safe to say, you guys have a full understanding of who Xenophanes is, and there will be a test on it later, so I hope you were paying attention. Now, we're going to talk about the many different projects this guy has going for him, and there are a lot of them. I really think some of these projects are exciting, so I'm going to share them with you, at least the ones I'm allowed to share. FNF fans, music fans, and EXE fans alike are going to love it. I know I said Zero isn't Xenophanes but green, but if you wanted that, there is a You Can't Run mix of Xer0phanes. It still has unique sprites though, and looks pretty good. However, there will be a reimagined version of it. I even have a trailer for you guys for the You Can't Run mix, as it's sounding really good. It's worth mentioning that in the You Can't Run mix, he'll be taking the form of other EXEs, making it reminiscent of Xenophanes, but having a unique twist to it by being Xer0phanes. And also features some of your favorite EXEs. Chip does need help in order to produce this. So if there are any animators that would be interested, I'll leave contact information where you can reach out to Chip, linked down below. To make the video the best it can be, he needs an animator for a special part that he can't reveal. So if you have experience or you're confident enough in your skills, I guess try reaching out to him and maybe you could be a part of this project. And to keep going on the FNF train, I've got an announcement involving one of Zero's most popular songs called Unite. For those of you who don't know, Unite is a song where Ultra M and Xer0phanes go against Godfield, which is actually something you guys could check out now. Basically, Godfield goes to a non-specific version of Earth that houses EXEs and horror brews. Godfield deems the world unfitting to exist because there's nothing to learn from it. It's just senseless murder, and Zero utilizes the information he gathered from his research and recruits Ultra M in hopes to defeat Godfield. Now, Ultra M wouldn't just help Zero out of the kindness of his heart. So, to sweeten the deal, Zero offers him freedom from his cartridge. Chip reached out to Lumpy Touch directly, and Lumpy actually told him Godfield's weakness. Friendship. No, I'm serious. They were weak individually, but together, they're stronger. The two work together and do defeat Godfield. To Godfield, he didn't fully understand as he's been alone for most of his life. The concept of them working together was sort of lost on him. However, the song is getting a sequel of sorts. Many.
There's even a comic for Unite that builds up to the events of what happens after they defeat Godfield. This is drawn by Mode Productions, and it looks really cool. This is just a bit of a teaser for you guys, and this will lead up to what happens next in the sequel.
Except now it's expanding towards the horrorverse of other fandoms, similar to Path to Deicide. For those who don't know, it's an FNF series by Gasgrass where EXEs team up to defeat Xenophanes. So it's something similar to that, but in this web series, it's Xer0phanes and Ultra M going against a bunch of horror creatures outside of the Mario and Sonic horrorverse, which is a really cool idea as it combines two of the biggest franchises and lets them go against horror creations you may have never heard of. Or you may have heard of. This series is called Gallery of the Gods, Tales of the Horrorverse. The premise is, after the Godfield fight, Ultra M and Xer0phanes realize there's more out there than just their own horrorverse. So why would Ultra M and Xer0phanes go after them or go out of their way? Well, those outside worlds, like Godfield, may come after them. They'll encounter such beings like Legion from the Troll Age files, and could be expanded all the way to Sin from Murder Drones. Personally, I don't know too much about either of them, but the possibilities are endless. For everyone who likes games like Outcome Memories, he will be featured in Memory Lane, an ASIM game that takes inspiration from Outcome Memories. He'll feature in the V5 update, and will have a bunch of different skins, such as Ghost Rider / Reaper theme skin, a frickin' Xenomorph, but the bulk of his design will come from fan interpretations of the character. So if someone made a fan adaptation of the character, it'll be featured here. Something Chip wanted to emphasize is, he always wants to give back to the community, and is incredibly grateful for it. It's a sentiment that I completely understand and agree with. While not everything is perfect all the time, I do get to meet some really nice and great people in the community. I also get to see passionate people work on games like Memory Lane, which I may or may not be talking about in an upcoming video. Up next, the next project I wanted to bring up was the Xenophanes Execution comic, where you get to see Zero's original origin story before the one made for NU Prime. So it's worth mentioning that it'll likely be released this year, telling his original tale in a comic-style way. Which, by the way, the art is fantastic. There's also an animation by Maple Riot where Xenophanes fights 2017X. Both of them will be voiced by their respective voice actors, Simi as 2017X and Kashi as Xenophanes. Keep in mind, this will focus on the legacy version of 2017X and not the recent iteration by Xer0phanes. And one of the coolest projects I'd like to bring up, and all those other ones are cool, but there's a lyrical song called Know My Name. The lyrics are written by Galaxia and is made by both Red Seas and sung by the longest solo ever and Madame Colossae. You guys probably know Red Seas. Most of you guys watching this, they made Moribund, Sonic Original, bunch of really good songs, even outside of the Sonic EXE sphere. And of course, Galaxia as a songwriter. This will not be the last time you will hear Galaxia, as somehow he keeps infecting my videos. I see you, you little snake, because he's actually helping me with a few of my own projects I'll talk about at a later date. I just thought it was funny that he'd been in 2 of my videos in a row. There's also a fan game called Danganronpa Bloodshot Red, where it's basically Danganronpa but a bunch of EXEs. And while I would have never thought to combine the two, this sounds like an amazing idea and features Xer0phanes as well. How cool. And as you guys may know, he's also a reoccurring character in EXE Jam, which, by the way, if you haven't checked out EXE Jam by Snoopy Your Kid, I really advise you guys check it out, because as you can see by the art style, it's fantastic and features a bunch of your favorite EXEs in it. It's also incredibly underrated. Xer0phanes looks absolutely amazing in it, so. Xer0phanes is a well thought out character, and really gives back to the community. There are tons of animations, songs, FNF mods, and more to look forward to. He amounts to more than just Xenophanes but green, and hopefully now you guys see that. Keep an eye out for all of the really cool concepts he's involved with, and a huge thank you to Galaxy Knight and Chip Reviews. Chip helped a lot providing all the details I needed, and Galaxy structured Zero's story, along with writing everything into existence. I'll have a link for both of them down below, along with everything else, and any current projects for Xer0phanes. Subscribe, remember, Chainsaw Man 10% off, smell like Denji, smell like a manipulative bitch.
And as always, stay spooky.
Alright, we're done here. Thanks again for showing up.
It is my pleasure. Though, there is just one thing. Why was this video so late?
You were trying to delay my best pal's big video because you knew he'd want you to cover everything, you fraud!
You are insufferable. If I go along with your delusion, will you leave me alone?
What delusion? It's just me, your best friend Sonic.
Right, fine. Come along, Sonic. Let's just go.
Sorry for being late.
The video is over! Go home, Galaxy!
Oh, guess I'll die then.